Naruto pursed his lips. It took him a moment to remember where he was and another blink to recall what he was doing here. He stepped forward upon the balcony and gazed straight toward the men assembled in the plaza below. Viserys coughed once behind him and his mind came back to the present. Right. They were here to choose new members of the Kingsguard, were they? No.
They'd lost 3 in recent days. One of old age, another choking on his food, another had simply vanished. One of those 3 was decidedly more noble than the rest. Do stop spacing out, cousin.
His gaze strayed back to the armored men and sure enough, he found Criston Cole among them. The knight that had disappointed him, the tourney, the one whom he thought might be reborn like him, reincarnated. He really didn't want to have anything to do the man, but he had to toss Rhaenyra a bone. It would be pointless to fight over something so trivial. He wouldn't let her rile him.
Why old Viserys had brought the 2 of them here, he'd never understand. Did he really think they would make up so easily?
Fine. He waved a hand at her. He's all yours.
Will you not choose one of your own? Naruto tried to ignore the bite in her voice and the challenge therein. He really, truly did. Rhaenyra.
Of course, you never listen to anything I have to say, she prattled on. Why would you now? Pick one and be done.
His temper slipped his grasp, and so did his tonnage. Why must you always be this way? I know not what you mean. Enough! Viserys snapped at them both, causing each to jump. Both of you! Naruto and Rhaenyra exchanged a black look between one another. The crown cannot stand strong while the House of the Dragon remains divided. He glared them both into silence before they could protest. You will cease this fighting at once. You are a family. Do you understand? Yes, uncle. As you wish, father. Good, he coughed into a fist. Can I trust the 2 of you to handle this matter alone without tearing into one another? Naruto looked to Rhaenyra. She shrugged one shoulder sullenly. If he behaves, I will. Truce, he offered the word, a proverbial olive branch. Very well.
Excellent. The king was all too eager to accept it. As such, he failed to see the tension simmering underneath. I'll leave you to it, then. Another cough. Naruto couldn't help but notice just how tired Rhaenyra's father looked. I need to have a word with Otto.
His piece said, he hobbled off, leaving them, and the knights below them, waiting in stoic silence. Naruto spoke into it. Can't we just get along? I don't want to fight with you. Rhaenyra's lower lip trembled just so as she whirled away. Was it his imagination? He hoped not.
Silence reigned. His cousin sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. Pick the next 2 and let's be done with this. It was as good as he'd get from her today. Naruto exhaled in a long-suffering sigh.
Then, I'll take that one. On a whim he looked around and picked out the most imposing of the lot. A great big brute clad in black iron armor and full helm. Though he stood head and shoulders above the rest. He bore no banner to speak of, only a great big bastard sword on his back and a massive shield in one hand. How he lifted that thing was anyone's guess. He looked strong. And there, carved into that shield, a great black dragon, not unlike that of Balerion. Well, what did they have here? You, he indicated the tall fellow with a wave of the hand. Yes, you, he continued when the silent knight perked up. He hadn't said a word yet, not a single syllable. Could he truly not speak? Congratulations and welcome to the Kingsguard. He wanted nothing more than to be done with this farce and visit Alicent, but there were procedures to observe, and they'd never let him leave until he finished. Kneel. The giant lumbered forward and knelt. Even then, he made Sir Criston Cole look small. Spark of curiosity kindled in Naruto's chest. Remove your helm. A pale face was revealed, shrouded by dark hair. Keen eyes met his. A good gaze. Strong, but not arrogant. Your name?
Tarkus, my lord. Here at last, the Black Knight spoke and finally bowed his head. Of black iron.
Naruto felt his brow furrow as he failed to recall it. I've never heard of that house. The ghost of a smile touched the knight's face. It is new, your grace. And your surname, he asked. Snow.
From the north, are you? At his nod, he felt the ghost of a grin touch his whiskered cheeks. Good. I hear the north has strong warriors. Have you come alone?
No, my lord. Tarkus bowed his head further still. My comrade Havel took ill on the road and is convalescing at a nearby inn. As such, he was unable to present himself before you today. I stand ready to take the oath in his stead. Rhaenyra hummed softly. You presume much, sir. Tarkus met her gaze unflinchingly. I presume the truth. The king called for strong warriors. We are strong.
Naruto ignored the byplay. Havel, why did that sound familiar? This friend of yours, is he a bastard like yourself?
Aye. And is he strong? He asked. Tarkus lifted his chin. The strongest in the north, my lord. I once saw him split a grown man in two with his dragon tooth club. He had a weapon carved from a dragon's tooth. Balerion might not like that. And why have you come? I'm not one for subtlety, your grace. Tarkus seemed to chew on his words for a moment, then shrugged. Allow me to be frank. He waved him on. The men of the north were known for their bluntness. In the old days, Torrhen Stark knelt to one dragon, and one alone. Balerion, the Black Dread. We would serve that dragon again. You cannot be serious. Rhaenyra's complaint snapped him back to reality. He's clearly a bastard. Why would you want someone like that guarding you?
Tarkus raised his gaze. Begging your pardon, princess, but that's not for you to decide. I came here to swear my sword to the prince, not you.
Rhaenyra bridled. Now, Naruto interposed himself between them both before someone could say something foolish. I'll accept your oath on his behalf if I find him worthy. You will lead me to him tomorrow. As to the rest of you, he looked past him to the discontent knights. Had he hurt their feelings? Tuh. Bunch of up-jumped ponces, this lot. He best could them with both hands tied behind his back and blindfolded besides. Why should he care what they thought? Thank you for your time. You are dismissed. Tarkus bowed his thanks.
Naruto kept smiling. He didn't drop the facade until everyone was gone. Are you mad? The very moment they were, Rhaenyra rounded on him. You haven't even met the man.
I will. Didn't you hear me? I intend to meet him tomorrow. When she didn't falter, he chose the gentle path. You said the next two were mine to choose. At her reluctant nod, he barreled on. If you can pick a man with combat experience, then so can I. We need those. You said so yourself. Better to have proper warriors with actual combat experience guarding your father than these idiots, right? Another nod now as she gripped her right arm. Her eyes flitted to his in a way. You ran roughshod over me in front of everyone? That wasn't my intent. He patted her head, drawing a fearsome pout from his cousin. You know that, don't you? She glowered up at him. Sometimes it feels like I don't know you at all. Ouch! That hurt more than he cared to admit. His temper stirred. Then talk to me, he said instead, carefully concealing that burst of anger now as he took his hand from her head. We're family, aren't we? I suppose. Then trust in me a little. He delivered a quick kiss to her forehead, causing her to still. As I trust you. Well, he trusted her to be an unpredictably moody girl sometimes, but he wasn't about to tell her that now, was he? At least he didn't have to fear a dagger in the back from her. Of all the dwellers in the Red Keep, he knew Rhaenyra at last wouldn't try to kill him. She didn't have the heart for it, and speaking of need, the Kingsguard had need of strong, loyal warriors, not tawny knights who had never tasted true blood on their blades. The men of the North were well known for such. Hopefully she would understand that in time.
Naruto didn't linger after that. He left a red-faced Rhaenyra to her thoughts and walked away down the hall.
As he did, he let his mind wander. Rhaenyra still baffled him, even months after their argument. At times she acted hostile, but he could tell her heart wasn't in it these days. Surely she wasn't fighting him solely for the sake of fighting. She couldn't be that foolish. He didn't want to believe it. Lashing out was understandable after losing a family member, let alone a parent, and he knew that pain all too well. But her temper was taking a terribly long time to cool. He really should have another talk with Viserys. Maybe he could help him make sense of this wild, chaotic, baffling girl. It's all worked out quite nicely for you, hasn't it, my lord? Naruto very nearly snarled. Again. Can a man be left to think in peace? Evidently not. He looked up, torn from his thoughts once more. Seemed to be happening an awful lot today. That was the third time today. He'd need to watch that. It wouldn't do to become too distracted. Someone might walk right up and knife him in the back if he wasn't careful. Not that such would kill him, of course, but still, it was the principle of the matter. But he needn't fear that today. He raised his gaze, carefully painting a pleasant smile upon his face once more. An unfamiliar man limped his way, leaning heavily upon a cane. He recognized him at a glance, if only because no one else had a leg like that. Clubfoot. Balerion growled in his head, making his expressed displeasure known for the first time today. Wretched worm. Not worthy of eating. Shh, don't say that aloud. Lord Larry Strong. He spoke slowly, drawing out each word as one might something foul. How fares you, brother Harwin?
I don't believe we've met.
We haven't, Naruto simpered back. But I've heard of you. Only good things, of course.
That gave him pause. Good. He didn't trust a slimy soul like this. At least his father Lionel served well enough on the small council. With Daemon and most of House Velaryon off dealing with the Stepstones, there was a sizable power vacuum in the Red Keep at the moment. Only natural that someone would try to fill it.
But why did it have to be him? He shook his head, pushing aside his inherent suspicion of strangers. How can I help you? I merely wish to meet you face to face. The second son surprised him with a limpid bow. To see if you lived up to your reputation. Pale brow rose. And I am satisfied. His smile didn't waver. May you have a most pleasant day, you Grace. And do tell Balerion I said hello. Command me. I will crush him. No, he said after a moment's pause. He's trying to get a rise out of us. Naruto watched Larry's hobble past with a scowl. The Game of Thrones never changed, it seemed. Someone always wanted something. Rhaenyra wanted her mother back. Alicent wanted love. Laena wanted to prove herself. Viserys wanted to preserve the Targaryen line, while Otto wanted said line protected for the good of the realm. He had no idea what Larry Strong wanted, and that worried him. The man rubbed him wrong way. He couldn't even say why. Perhaps he might suffer an accident in the future. Such a shame that would be, after all. Cripples tripped all the time. 0, 0.
Two hooded figures met once more.
Not in an alley this time, but a bar of all places. Must we be here? The shorter of the two complained bitterly. Flea bottom reeks. None will hear us, I assure you. The first assured the second in measured tones. Do you have what I asked for?
The second slid a piece of sealed parchment his way.
Excellent. The first considered the sigil stamped into the wax for a long moment, then stowed it up his sleeve with quick dispatch. The king is weak, he continued apace. More despair of him every day. Most will likely abandon him in the years to come. And what of his heir? The first shrugged. Suitable for our needs. More pliable than his father at any rate. Though I have no desire to face him on the field.
With luck, you won't have to. Luck, You says. There is no such thing as luck in this world. If there were, we wouldn't be here skulking about in the dark like a pair of common cutpurses.
We remained united, then. For now, so long as our interests align. Then, the plan proceeds apace.
The plan proceeds.
2 glasses clinked together. The conspirators drank deeply. And so Westeros plunged ever closer to war. With not a soul to hear. 0.
Have you considered leaving the capital for a time? Naruto clicked his tongue and bit it until the pain centered him. It brought him clarity. He'd known this was coming after his argument with Rhaenyra, but he hadn't expected it to come quite so quickly. Seeking out Viserys might have been a mistake after all. Still, it was too late to take it back now.
Runestone might be my inheritance, but I don't intend to terrorize the Vale anytime soon. He threw himself into a chair. Let the steward run the castle for now. Viserys tutted softly. It might benefit you to see the lands you would rule. I agree, he nodded, but doing so would leave you undefended.
You needn't worry about me. I can defend myself.
He frowned. Evidently the king wasn't taking the hint. He'd have to channel a bit of demon here, the best parts, not the worst. Are you that eager to step aside? The old king flinched.
I know you're still hurting. He looked to him with pity, quietly quelling the silent pang of sorrow in his chest. You had an impossible choice to make that day. It cost you your wife, your son, and now it might take your life. And then Balerion came back atop all that, only to reject you. Now even Rhaenyra is giving you a hard time.
What would you have me do?
Take another dragon, uncle. He sat up to look him in the eye, hoping he would understand. Do something. Anything. Don't just waste away like this. Show the realm your strength.
He watched him intently for some sign of strength. Something. Anything. But he saw none. Viserys sagged in his seat, weary beyond his years. I'm afraid I have little left. Damn it. He'd come here to ask about Rhaenyra, not to deal with this.
Nato blew out an exasperated breath. I can't force you, but you're going to waste away like this. You do realize that, don't you? Perhaps that is what I want.
And what about your family? What of Rhaenyra? She will have a place in the court. The king waved his words aside with his good arm. And in yours, I hope. But what of Alicent? The 2 of you seem rather close these days. Have you considered what I asked? I have way to ruin his good mood. Yes, I'm sure Otto's ecstatic. Viserys tutted. You still don't trust him? He huffed. No, I don't. Viserys considered him for a long moment. And who do you trust? I trust you. He looked away with a grumble. I trust Alicent. I want to trust Rhaenyra, but she is in mourning, nephew. Give her time. He flung up an arm. It's been a year. We are the blood of the dragon, dear boy. A rare laugh left his uncle's lips. Our tempers often run hot. Perhaps a few more months should give her flames time to cool, but on to other matters. You must be careful. The realm stands upon a knife's edge. Every Lord Paramount saw Balerion on the day I named you heir, and he has been active of late. We cannot hide him much longer. Wasn't going to. You misunderstand. A hint of steel crept into the king's voice. The realm stands upon a knife's edge, and there is another matter. Naruto stilled. He didn't like the sound of that. Lord Corley sent me a raven. His throat went dry. I thought he was still in the stepstones. He is, but that doesn't preclude him from sending messages across the narrow sea. Here? Sure enough, he fished the letter in question out of his tunic. See for yourself. The seal was already broken. He unfurled it slowly. Read it now.
Your Grace, he mumbled the words aloud, summarizing it quite nicely amidst all the flowery prose. It would do me great honor if your heir were to take the hand of my daughter, Laena, in marriage. What in blazes is this? His brow shot into his hair. Me, with little Lena, she's just a child.
Then wait until she is of age. Viserys shrugged his good shoulder. Should she find Vhagar, she may have a beast to rival Balerion.
Nothing can rival him. He crumpled the letter up and threw it in the hearth, leaving it to burn. And didn't you say I could choose who I married? You just asked me to marry Alicent. I did, and you can. Despite the battered state of his body, the king didn't flinch. Damn him. I am merely counseling you in these matters, as a good uncle would his nephew.
Not very good counsel. Viserys smiled. You could of course marry them both. Naruto nearly choked on his own spit. Was it hot in here all of a sudden? You're a Targaryen, his uncle prattled on, mistaking his silence for acceptance. Moreover, you're my heir, the heir to the Iron Throne. Such would be well within your rights. No. They were not having this conversation.
Flushing, he rose from his chair with all due haste, paced past the miniature carving of old Valyra, and moved to the balcony. Even from here he could see Balerion on the horizon, wheeling overhead. He envied him sometimes. How freeing it must be to simply fly away from one's problems, to be so powerful that none would dare question you, let alone tell you what to do. Dragons had it easy. Being human, now that was difficult.
I could fly to the stepstones, he mused aloud. Burn out the crab feeder. Viserys rasped laugh. You sound like your father. You're sure you won't marry?
No. Viserys lifted his chin, mildly impressing him. I will not, as I said before. It would take a remarkable woman indeed for me to even consider such. He looked past him, back to his stone carvings, and stifled a cough against his fist once more. I will never love another as I loved your aunt.
Another coughing fit seized him, this one harsher than the last. Naruto quirked a brow his way. You've been coughing an awful lot lately. I'm well enough. His uncle slumped in his seat. Now, if it's all the same to you, I would like some time alone.
Naruto was more than happy to grant that request. He all but fled from the room.
He had the sinking suspicion. Viserys wasn't well. And if one day that health finally failed him, he dreaded what came next. Marriage. Gods be good marriage. Her and Naruto. Together. The thought was heady. Dangerous, too. Alicent knew the risks of entertaining such notions. Going after the most eligible noble in all the 7 kingdoms. She must have a death wish. Just thinking of it had her burying her face in a pillow with a keening whine. The noise was muffled in her chambers, with not a soul to hear. Thank the gods for small mercies.
Mercy. Was that what this was?
Naruto was her prince, and the king wanted her to marry him. She should have been happy, delighted, overjoyed. It should have been simple. Nothing was simple in King's Landing. Alicent didn't dare bring this to her father, if only because she knew precisely what his counsel would be. Convince him, seduce him, win the throne. The thought made her sick. She hadn't kissed Naruto out of some damnable duty. She was fond of him. She enjoyed his company. She wanted to be with him. To even suggest that such was a plot to elevate her family. It made her blood boil. Naruto could certainly be a bit reckless at times, but she cared for him, had cared for him, for quite some time now. Father would pat her on the back, congratulate her, and tell her to do her duty, as if he'd planned this all along. Piss on that! A small voice hissed in her head. We chose him! Us! Not father. She really had, hadn't she? Perhaps he had chosen her? Hadn't he? Oh gods, what if he hadn't? What if he chose someone else? Why in the 7 hells was she sitting around for? Then, she had to act? In a panic, Alicent burst to her feet. She grabbed her book. Someone knocked on his door.
Naruto had an inkling who it might be. The hour was late, but not so late as to refuse guests. He could have, of course, could have feigned sleep and turned them away.
But he didn't, because he knew who it was. Sure enough, when he swung open the door, well, there she was. Alicent stood before him, hair done up, clad in a pale white gown of finest silk, and clutching a heavy tome tight to her chest as though it were some sort of shield. He had no doubt she'd brain him with it if he said something to upset her. The thought made him smile. She stared at his feet and nowhere else. I'm here for my lessons. Lessons? Right. He remembered now. He was still teaching her Valyrian, wasn't he? It had been a bit since their last session. He stepped aside and let Alicent in, closed the door behind her.
The second he did, she dropped the book. Their eyes met.
Naruto saw the unspoken question in her eyes. He steeled himself. They shouldn't.
They really shouldn't.
This was wrong. Wasn't it? Alicent stepped forward and touched a trembling hand to his chest. With the other, she reached up, pulled the pins out her and let it tumble free down her back. Gods, how long had it been since he'd seen her with her hair down? She looked lovely tonight, the very vision of beauty. Surely she wasn't going to add. She was gonna. Wait. He caught her wrist in his grip before she could do anything she might have to regret. You don't have to force yourself. Is that what you fear? Her eyes held his. No one is forcing me to do this. Not my father, not yours, not anyone. She stepped to him and he felt her body's heat press against his through the gossamer thin fabric of her gown. I'm tired of dancing around this. I've made my decision. She pushed her hand forward, not resisting, but reaching up to cup his cheek as he continued to grip her wrist. I choose you. Leaning up on the very tips of her toes, she planted a kiss on his chin. Do you choose me? His brain fizzled. He was still formulating that thought when Alicent tugged her hand free. She reached up with both hands, hooked her thumbs in the shoulders of her gown, and let it drop, fine fabric pool at her feet. She wasn't wearing anything underneath.
In an instant all Naruto's arguments fell flat. His throat went drier than Dorne. All semblance of thought fell to the wayside. Her hand touched his and Naruto felt a pleasant thrill shoot down his spine as he reciprocated the motion in kind. She'd worn perfume tonight, just the kind he liked. He wanted her, perhaps almost as much as she sought him.
He wasn't sure who moved next in all fairness, him or her. It didn't matter really. Someone did, and that was that. He found hers in his arms, her mouth on his, felt his hands rise to cup her waist as he drew her closer, her own fingers fumbling at his trousers. Her mouth was warm on his, fierce and insistent, and it was all he could do to return the favor, such was her passion.
In all his years, he'd never felt so alive. Perhaps that was the risk talking, the heady realization that someone might walk in on them at any moment. He paused, made wary by the thought.
Don't you dare, Alicent hissed at him. Stop and I swear I'll gut you. She realized what she'd said a moment later and flushed. I'm sorry, she gasped. I didn't mean. He grabbed her by the rear and drew her closer, biting her lip. Always nice to see you show some spine. Alicent was silent for a long moment, until her eyes flashed. Then she jumped him. They never made it to the bed. I understand congratulations are in order. They are, I suppose. Thank you. Whenever is the wedding? Whenever we wish.
The sooner.
No. I beg your pardon.
You did not choose him for me. I chose him and he chose me. Thus, it will be when we wish. He and I, not before.
Future scene.
Stand in the sun. Silken sheets. Warmth nestled against him in his bed.
An almost pleasant soreness pervading every inch of his body. Dazed though Naruto was, It only took him a moment to get his bearings. And what wonderful bearings they were. A quick glance confirmed his initial confusion. He wasn't alone. Alicent lay sound asleep at his side, half sprawled atop his chest, head tucked into him, and not a stitch of clothing to her name. Come to think of it, he wasn't wearing anything either beneath the sheets. Oh dear. His mind loosed a singular bleat of confusion before he remembered the events of last night. I choose you. Do you choose me? Clothes falling to the floor, a flurry of movement. Her mouth on his hands on her hips, her hands in his hair, her hips grinding against his, as she cried out his name. Oh, mine. Oh? Oh. So last night hadn't been a dream after all. Good. He might have gone mad if that were the case. Alicent certainly seemed content enough. She remained sound asleep where she lay, dead to the world.